So I'm not going to talk about real dollars, because if I do, you'll associate my role in those dollars with some kind of a commitment, especially after Ian's really powerful talk. So I'm really going to talk about monopoly dollars, and it all started with a report that was in the papers last week that Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is now officially the world's richest man with $100 billion to his name. A big number, and it got me thinking about what I would do if I had $100 billion in my own bank account. And it occurred to me, not for any particular reason, that I could take the annual Commonwealth contribution to my favourite topic of the day, which is the national research infrastructure, and I could quadruple it. I could throw in maybe several hundred postdocs and a supercomputer, and I'd still have $99 billion left over. But what would I actually do if I was a Silicon Valley billionaire? Well, I imagine that my thought process would go a little bit like this. Alan, as a Silicon Valley billionaire, what do you want more than anything else in the world? To be rich? Tick. To be famous? Done that. What next? Of course, to live forever, to be immortal. So, Alan, what do you need to do in order to live forever? Solve death. Excellent. Solve death. That's it. So, Alan, how are you going to solve death? I know. I'll set up a research institute with an enormous endowment. Google has Calico, the California Life Company, with $1 billion to fight aging. Mark Zuckerberg has the Chan Zuckerberg Science Institute with $3 billion to, and this is a quote out of their mission statement, to cure or prevent all disease by 2100. Jeff Bezos is an investor in Unity Biotech, and they've got the motto, age differently. So death, you've got to admit, it's overdue for disruption. So Alan, which camp will you join? The New Yorker magazine tells me that I've got two options. On the one hand, I could try the biological path, which is to hack death by hacking yourself. And the New Yorker has given this a name. They call that camp the meat puppets. What can you do? I could take blood from the young and infuse it into the old. And people have tried this in mice. Or I could take a pill designed to target the accumulation of the so-called zombie cells in aging tissues. Or I could take my epigenetic destiny into my own hands, with the next generation gene editing tools, tweaking the genes that turn adult cells back into youthful cells. Well, it works sort of possibly in mice. On the other hand, I could just give up on the old hardware and try the digital route, and I could join the second camp, which is called the uploaders. And here, I would gradually replace all of my body parts with bionics to keep myself alive. Until that point in time, the computer memory and algorithms have advanced to the point that they can hold every nuance of my human brain. And somehow, a means will be found to upload me into an immortal silicon shell. Now, Alan, be honest, what's the reality? The reality is I'm still going to die. Yes, it's sad to say, you can do many things with $100 billion, but you can't buy immortality. But that's not to say that the people spruiking it are totally detached from reality. They sense what you sense. We are on the verge of something extraordinary in medical science. It feels like a tipping point. It feels like the dawn of a new era. And it feels that way even to baby boomers, perhaps especially to baby boomers. After all, we were all there for the run-up. Take me. I was born in 1953, the year that Crick and Watson demonstrated the molecular structure of DNA. So born in 53. I was 30 when the first disease gene was mapped. I was 50 when the human genome sequence was announced. 50 years of painstaking work. And for all of that time, people were thinking about what we could do if we went beyond investigation, if we could somehow intervene. We even had a name for it, genetic engineering. That phrase, genetic engineering, turned up in a science fiction novel way back in 1951, so it predates Crick and Watson. But that was science fiction, light years away from science fact, maybe. Then something else that we were promised in the 1950s, artificial intelligence. I was 3 when the term was first used at an academic conference in 1956. And once again, science fiction beat science to the punch, because Isaac Asimov coined his famous 3 laws of robotics in 1950. In 1950, we had 1 computer in Australia. It was considered to be a technological marvel, weighed 2 tonnes. At that time, it seemed inconceivable that we could ever really be forced to grapple with the implications of Asimov's vision. If it cost so much to build a machine that big, that could do so little, how could we possibly build a machine that could think? And if we couldn't build a machine that could think, how could we possibly conceive of hacking ourselves, recoding, reprogramming, optimising for longevity, if not for eternity? Well, what I've just described, that's how it feels to travel along an exponential curve. To the best of your knowledge, it's linear until it's not. From then, the breakthroughs, they cluster closer and closer together, trickle into tide, tide into tsunami. And that's what we're seeing now. Think about the last decade in AI, artificial intelligence. IBM's Watson computer beat humans in the American computer game called Jeopardy in 2011. Extraordinary breakthrough. AlphaGo Master beat the best humans in the game of Go in 2017 after 3 years of development. Not a lot of development. 3 years, probably the hardest game in the world to play. Go, and AlphaGo Master beat the world's best. Then its successor, called AlphaGo Zero, came along. It took a mere 40 days to learn all the principles and strategies that human players have ever conceived. And that conception has been over thousands of years and countless generations. And AlphaGo Zero came up with novel tactics that we had never imagined. 40 days, it's getting faster. Now, every branch of science feeds the progress in computing. Physics, chemistry, and now biology, with developments like the neuromorphic chip, which is modelled on the neural networks of the brain. And progress in computing feeds back into every branch of science, in turn making possible things that perhaps only Einstein could contemplate, but even he, in some cases, thought we could never achieve them, like the detection of gravitational waves, like the mapping of the human brain, like gene therapies. Thanks in part to computing, the cost of genome sequencing has plummeted. We're closing in on the $1,000 threshold, and this cost crash, it's not matching Moore's law. It's vastly exceeding Moore's law. And then CRISPR, the capacity to edit swiftly and cheaply, at the level of the individual letter, to accelerate research and develop tailored therapies to treat disease. Together, the digital revolution and the genetic revolution make a health revolution, precision medicine. At long last, a chance to deliver on the promise of decades, customised treatments tailored to the person, delivered to the population. A decade ago, it might have been fanciful to prophesy that humanity will leave this century as a different species than the one that entered. And now it's commonplace to see talk of humanity 2.0. So you look at that maze of possibilities. Silicon Valley looks at that maze of possibilities. You both want the same thing, to find the path to the maze, to find the path through the maze to impact. The difference is just a question of expectation and degree. Hubris, which underpins Silicon Valley, means setting out on the path to the utterly inconceivable, solving death. Audacity, on the other hand, is setting out on the path of the unconceived. Something that others haven't grasped, that you know to be achievable, that people of credibility will sign on to. It means framing the goal and asking, even demanding, to be held to account. Hubris is just asking for mockery, but audacity for a medical institution, a medical research institute like yours in the year 2017 is required. So let's go back to the start of this thought process. This time it's you, and you're not a free and easy billionaire, sorry. You're in Australia, you're spending other people's money, and you're looking for impact. So the questions are for you. Question, what do you want to achieve? And the answer is it's already there. It's in the mission statement of this alliance. Hope, health, and prosperity. And it's not just about vastly better lives for a few of us, achieved at a tremendous and unsustainable cost. It's about greater health span for all, longer lives with fewer years of disability. Question, are the existing technologies sufficient? Answer, well, they're good. But we wouldn't be here today if we thought the task was done. There's so much more to do. Look at brain cancer. A 5-year survival rate of about 25%, and it's hardly shifted in 30 years. Look at Alzheimer's disease. We are better at managing symptoms, but we can't stop the progression, nor can we prevent it. Look at the enormous cost and trauma associated with chronic conditions, mental illnesses, diabetes, heart disease. In the 20th century, we reaped enormous benefit from basic public health interventions, workplace safety, tackling smoking, infection controls. We certainly haven't picked the last of the low-hanging fruit, but we can work higher in the tree. Through medical science, we've improved the survival rates on breast cancer and leukemia, and we've pushed out the age of death due to cardiac disease. Ian, I tip my hat to you. Australia has led the world in vaccination. So, for new solutions, we need more Ians and more research. And Australians overwhelmingly agree. The support for medical research is strong and sustained. The trust in our medical research institutes is consistently high. So next question, what is the path to impact? And the answer is that everybody in this room should have an answer. So let me give you the answer that I give in my capacity as chief scientist. And that is that countries like Australia, we have to be very creative. It would be easy, frankly, to replicate what other countries are already doing on a smaller scale with less money. That, as you know, that wouldn't be helpful. So we have to do much better than that. We've got to make our money work hard. We succeed when we collaborate on the strategy, when we combine our capabilities in novel ways to make a new mission. And in this context, a mission is not code for an applied research agenda. On the contrary, look for a moment at the lessons of CRISPR. The story of its development is just so complicated that even science can't sort it out. It's now a job for lawyers. But it begins with the discovery of a strange microbial repeat sequence discovered by a microbiologist named Francisco Mojica, who was working on samples collected in the marshes off the Spanish coast way back in the early 1990s. It had to wait for advances in bioinformatics, for the development of massive DNA sequencing databases, for the momentum of the Human Genome Project, and above all, for better computers. It's the classic dance, where new technologies open new doors in science, and science opens new doors in technology, and so the circle goes. It's always serendipity waiting to happen. When we engage in the basic science, in developing the research technologies, and in applying them, we put ourselves in the sweet spot, the serendipity sphere. We can make new potential. But we have to be looking with an eye to really seeing and seizing the chance. Because it's not about basic versus applied. It's about serendipity with strategy across the spectrum. So last question, how best for you to engage with Australians? And the answer is simple, include them. As Chief Scientist, I've read many articles about research grants and new discoveries, but I've also tried to think about what the average person might know. So bear with me, assume for a moment that the members of Parliament represent the general community. And if you search Hansard, which records every word spoken in the House of Representatives and the Senate, these are the phrases you won't find. CRISPR, gene editing, bioprinting, precision medicine, they don't occur once. Telesurgery has been mentioned once, and synthetic biology has been mentioned once. Now, it may be that the politicians are aware of these topics, and they might, but they haven't had reason to talk about them. But they will need to talk about them, to understand them, to explain them, and to enable them. We hear a great deal about transformational and disruptive technologies. Perhaps from time to time we forget what they mean is change. Change on a scale and at a speed that it is difficult to predict, but nonetheless it has to be planned for and it has to be paid for. So we do need people to notice. And we have a powerful starting position. We've got the most important commodity of all. It's not cat videos. It's not celebrity endorsements. It's trust. Australians trust you. And they trust you not just with navigating the paths of the future, but with the decisions that they make for themselves. And I've learned from having tried that it's not helpful to refer your questions about medicine to Google. Instead, I go to the Mayo Clinic or I go to the Johns Hopkins Institute. And there I find advice that's credible, integrated and helpful. I would like to see go-to sources in Australia, and I know that many of you are already working hard to fill that space. A media release, it's okay to spark interest, but we want more than interest. We want insight, we want sustained engagement. The best research institutes develop it by their skill in telling human stories and arming us with practical information. How do I talk to my children about cancer? What are the implications of taking a genetic test? How can I support a relative who has dementia? Providing that information is part of our social responsibility. But it's also part of the strategy. It's about earning trust, investing in it, expanding it, protecting it, and putting it to work. So we should treat it as core business because it is core business. So my challenge to this conference is simple. Pull the brilliant future down from the billionaires and put it into everyone's grasp. Show us your path to impact. Inspire us as a nation to achieve it together. We might not live forever, but let's make it splendid to be alive. Thank you. I'm not sure if I should do questions. There were no hard facts in that.
So I guess the question I'd be asking Jeff Bezos is regarding survival, how do you handle the behaviour of world leaders? Perhaps the Donald Hibb issue. But post-truth, distrust of the leaders occurring and increasing in America. A lot said about this. We follow American trends. Do you think it'll come here?
Well, I think it's already here. There's a growing distrust of experts where they're labelled experts, and people are confused by science nowadays, and it's not because of fraud or inappropriate behaviour by scientists, it's because science is now extremely complex. We all grew up, or most of us grew up in the era we were inspired, or I was, by the space mission. And it was pretty clear, you know, if the spaceship blew up, it failed, if it got into orbit and people came back and were recovered, it was successful. But now most of what we do is through modelling and complex epidemiological research, and so much of what gets published is unreproducible. So when it comes to faith in science, it'd be wonderful to see something done about the what seems to be an ever-increasing fraction of papers that can't be reproduced when people do set out to reproduce them. And I'm not saying for a second that's because of anything malicious or deliberately fraudulent. It's just that it's hard. And the other thing about experts is people react almost viscerally if they're told, well, an expert has come to speak to them. They think somebody's going to come and try to browbeat them into adopting a point of view, which is not the point of view that they currently hold. So I'm quite serious about that last challenge. When people have a genuine health problem, that's when they truly want expertise. And it's just too hard if you go out and look at press releases, or try to follow press releases, or just go Google and you look at the first 10 hits. You need sites that you go back to again and again because you've learned to trust them. And this is something I talked about a month ago in a talk that I gave at QBI, at UQ, the Queensland Brain Institute. And in preparation for that, I came across the fact that they had just recently launched a series of guidelines on various brain disease, mostly mental disease, various brain diseases, and they're comprehensive. You don't have to look at that for a bit of your information and go somewhere else. They're not trying to sell you anything. It's a bit what I see on the Mayo Clinic and the Johns Hopkins Clinic. And next time I have a friend who's got glioblastoma or something horrible, I will go there. That's probably my first point of call. We've got to get away from this belief that the way to get the message across to, or the message of science to the population is to get media consultants to come in and train our young scientists on how to speak to the media. Because what they end up doing is training them to be confident in their presence, to have an example and say something glib that people will get. But at the end of the day, when people have a genuine health problem in their family, and everybody has a genuine or pressing health problem in their family, they want much more than that. And it needs to be somewhat centralised.
Questions? Right.
Just to comment on that, we considered this at QMR as well, and the immediate reaction I got was, well, we better be very careful because somebody will sue us if we give wrong advice or if they interpret it the wrong way, so we better keep our heads down. And that's a problem, I think, right through the system. We're so risk averse now that we really are better off doing nothing. We won't get into trouble. We won't do much either.
So I ran a company in America for 20 years, and eventually I realised that the hardest job that I had was managing the professionals who were working for me so that I could have a commercial advantage rather than recede into the office and hide. It's the auditors and the lawyers, in their genuine effort to protect you, who ruin, absolutely destroy your ability to proceed. So you've got to step above that. You have to manage them. You've got to say to those lawyers, look, we can't do nothing. Except that we cannot not do this. We are going to publish. Tell us where we truly should not step, but don't prevent us from giving meaningful advice to people. You need to manage professionals. It's not easy.
Alan, I have to challenge you a little bit. I think that I would agree with you that the most important thing that we have to offer is that we are trusted. The problem is that while we may be trusted, we're not believed. And the best example of that is that the major gains that have been made in health over the last 150 years are indubitably public health gains, where we have changed people's behaviour in order to improve their health outcomes. We could do immensely better with health in this country if we could persuade people to look after themselves better. And they hear the messages, but they don't believe us. And I would say that investing in solving that problem will yield longevity much in excess of what we can do with CRISPR-Cas technology right now. What would you say to that?
I'd say that if you put in a grant application, it better be for long-term funding, because the answers won't be simple. Nothing is simple. We're talking with human beings. One of the first things that was explained to me when I took on the job of chief scientist is, Alan, your job is to give evidence and considered opinion to the Prime Minister, the Minister for Industry and Science, and relevant ministers, so they can use that when they're considering their policy initiatives. But don't imagine for a second that they will base their policy initiatives on that evidence-based advice that you give them, because at the end of the day, they have to make their policies for the broader constituency. The same is when you're talking to the broader public. If people don't see an actual benefit for themselves, then they prefer to take the route of not being involved. That's one of the big problems with vaccination now. We've been so successful that people are not seeing the kids with rubella and polio and the shocking things that used to be a blight on our community. They think it's okay, and then the smart ones think about herd immunity and the fact that they can pull themselves out. So we have to have the actual benefits, but I don't have a simple solution. But I do think that building on your starting point of being trusted, and building on that by putting out more trustworthy advice rather than shallow snippets is a better way to go. But even if I did an experiment to prove that, it might not be reproducible.
So we do have NHMRC immunisation handbooks, and we do have various other statements. You're challenging the institutes themselves to come up perhaps individually with advice which could be patchy, duplicated. Is there a way that we could...
No, absolutely. The institutes have to do it themselves. There's a role for government, there's a role for the institutions, there's a role for collaboration across institutions, and there's a role for collaboration between institutions and government. But if you think about Australia's economy, or just shift from medical to economy, I find it extraordinary that Australia's economy is the only economy in the world that's had 26 years of GDP growth without a recession, and we're very likely to go into the 27th year. And during those 26 years, we've averaged about 1%. Our GDP has averaged about 1% better than the OECD average. You couldn't say it's because government has led the way. Government does do sometimes some good things, of course, but the wonderful thing is Australian industry, Australian entrepreneurs are not waiting for government to lead the way. Everybody criticises our education system, but in general, we do a pretty good job educating young people, some of whom go into professions, but some of whom become entrepreneurs and businessmen, and somehow it works because people aren't waiting. And of course, the same is true here.
So I wonder how many institutes or networks actually have public consultative information on their websites. I just wonder if people would...
I'll have to go and read them all.
Like what Frank said, is there a concern about legal issues?
Jeff?
I remember. Is there a microphone? Oh yeah. I remember when guidelines first came in, clinical guidelines, and this first question people were asking was, this is going to be a legal nightmare. So it inhibited a lot of organisations putting them out in the early days. Some people might remember that, but it's turned out to be totally baseless. And I suspect the same. I doubt the Mayo Clinic is sued because it's got clinical information out there. So if it's accurate, just make sure it's accurate. I think the chance of being sued is negligible.
Marie from the Garden Institute. We've attempted to put information on in terms of the diseases we research, and we research quite a number of them. And we find it just extraordinarily difficult to maintain them to be current and accurate with so much clinical information out there. And most of us are not clinicians, we're basic researchers, and so we rely on the clinicians to constantly make sure that what we've got up there is actually giving accurate information to the public who want exactly what you're saying, which is accurate and meaningful information. So it's an absolutely huge exercise to be able to do that for a medical research institute, even the size of ours. So I'm kind of really quite difficult.
Two things I'd say on that. The first is when you're putting up a information resource for the public, it doesn't have to be up to date to the most recent research published in the last 1, 2 or 3 months, unless it was some extraordinary breakthrough. So don't set your goals too high. The second thing I'd say is don't try to be too expansive. Much better to do a few topics deeply and well and have a process for maintaining it than to cover every field in your institute. Narrow is good.
Brendan, last question.
Microphone's along my way. Alan, thank you so much for that. You touched on the fact that we're small in Australia, whether it's medical or non-medical research. You said we need to be clever and to innovate. Totally agree with that. I don't do the rounds at Canberra as often as you and Ian and Anne, but often enough, and commonly it gets put to me, whether seriously or not, that we are small, and why don't we just import all our research from elsewhere? And we tend to, as part of our argument in a sophisticated or relatively unsophisticated way, say, well, there's no way of effectively, for no other reason, but to properly import the sort of 97% plus or so that's done elsewhere. You couldn't do it without having your own cutting-edge research. But it is a bit of a throwaway line, which isn't hugely evidence-based, as I understand. How would you answer that question?
It does come up. It doesn't come up often. It's actually quite rare that I've heard it, but of course I have heard it. In some fields it's easy. So if you're in agriculture, it's very easy to answer the question. The agricultural challenges are location specific. But I agree with you. Medical research is very universal and in an extremely unthinking perspective, you could say, well, just import it all, which is your question. But the reasons why that's not appropriate are broad and they're hard to quantify. It's workforce capability. If our goal is to adopt and adapt, you need workforce capability to do that, and you need research capabilities in the teachers, the senior clinicians, the senior researchers, and you need that continuous process of training the incoming generation, because you can't just buy in and use in a thoughtless fashion. So partly it's developing our workforce potential, it's our ability to deal with the complex technologies that will be coming in a uniquely Australian way. We've got to adopt it. But then there are more social responsibility arguments. I was under a questioning of the Senate estimates asked a similar question about carbon dioxide emissions. Well, Chief Scientist, if Australia's emissions are only 1.3% of all the carbon dioxide, why should we bother? Let's just sit back and relax and leave it to the rest of the world. And my answer there was that if we think about democracy, if we had that same attitude to voting, and if everybody said my vote doesn't count, then we wouldn't have a democracy anymore. Or in vaccinations, we were talking about before, if people said, well, everybody should get vaccinations, but why should I take a 0.00001% risk for my child? Then we'd be back into the terrible times pre-vaccination. So I think there's a logical argument about workforce capability and our ability to adopt and adapt, which would be crippled if we didn't do research. And there's a social responsibility, our role as a player in the world sphere. And you very quickly find that other countries would see us as a pariah as well. So I don't think there's a simple black and white statement that proves the importance of it. But there are so many reasons why it's important that you just need to do it.
Thank you very much.